Tonight, we travel east to a land of misty mountains and quiet pine forests, to a world of sandals on wooden floors, ink brushed onto parchment, and the soft rustle of silk sliding through narrow corridors. You may think you know the samurai, warriors of honor, men of the sword, figures carved from legend and discipline. But tonight, we do not follow them into battle. We follow the ones who stood behind them, the hands that dressed them in armor, the fingers that folded the letters they never wrote, the voices that spoke only in whispers, grew and bowed when they were never seen. This is not a story of glory. It is a story of service, of patience, of ritual, of long days and quiet footsteps. It is the world behind the katana, where honor is measured not in victory, but in persistence. So now, let the world grow dim. Let your breath slow. Let your muscles soften and allow yourself to drift gently into another time, a place where duty was everything. Even if your name was never remembered, welcome to the hidden truths of samurai servants. Let us begin. Let us begin not with the warrior on horseback, nor the one whose blade gleams in the sunlight, but with the one who follows silently behind him, the one who carries the armor, the one who ties the knots just right, the one who disappears before the battle begins and reappears when the blood has dried. The samurai's attendant, known as Kosh Jinin, or simply as the servant, depending on his rank, his age, and the house to which he belonged. It was not an easy life. It was not a glorious life. And it was certainly not a quiet one. But it was essential. Tonight, you are invited to step into a role almost no one remembers, to live a day and a night in the woven straw sandals of a samurai's attendant. Breathe slowly. Let your body settle and come with me into a world of shadowed hallways, leather bindings, sweat-damp cloth, and expectations higher than any temple gate. You rise long before your master does. Outside, corridors of the estate, the floorboards creak beneath your feet, but you've learned to step lightly. You are not meant to be heard. Your first task: boil water. Prepare tea. The brazier glows faintly from the night before. You feed it new charcoal. The kettle hisses. You measure out the leaves with practiced care. Not too bitter, not too hot. Your master prefers it smooth. Then you slide open the sheiji screens to let in the morning light. Not too much, just enough to rouse, not disturb. Now comes the armor. You do not wear it, but you must know every piece more intimately than the one who does. You run your fingers over the chords of the cuirass. The D, checking for fraying. You wipe the lacquered menpo, the fearsome half-mask, free of dust and oil. The kabuto, the helmet, must shine, but not too brightly. Too much polish, and it may reflect light and reveal a position on the battlefield. You lay it out on a woven mat, piece by piece, in the correct order. You bow toward it, and you wait. Your master rises. He says nothing. He does not have to. You help him dress. The armor is heavy. Each part must be tied precisely. The cords must be flat, the knots symmetrical. The chest must be protected without restricting breath. The sleeves must allow for movement, but not flutter. You fasten the cords. You smooth the sleeves. You place the helmet gently in his hands. He leaves. You clean up Dot, and the day has only just begun. The house does not run itself. There is no magic that places the sandals by the door, sweeps the walk, or cools the sake just before your lord returns. These things happen because of you. You repair what is torn. You sweep what is stained. You water the garden before the sun rises too high and dries the moss. You polish brass that no one ever praises, and dust lacquered boxes that no one ever opens. Your hands remember every rhythm. You fold the inner robes just so, left over right, always with a collar aligned. You wrap the scrolls in cloth, then again in paper, tying with cord in the proper color and pattern for that week's guests. You light the lamps before dusk. You extinguish them after everyone has gone to sleep. No one thanks you, and no one needs to, because if you do your work correctly, it is invisible. Only mistakes are seen, and that is why you check everything twice. You lift each sandal to inspect the stitching. You untie and retie the sash around your lord's katana before he comes downstairs, just in case. You taste the rice and then spit it out to ensure it's not overcooked. You remember preferences, unspoken needs, unread glances, because your master will never say thank you. He will only say, "Why is this not ready?" Summer in the provinces brings a humidity that sticks to your skin and slides down your back like oil. Your robes, once white, cling to you before the noon bell. You are still expected to bow correctly, to move gracefully, to serve without drawing attention to your discomfort. In winter, your knuckles crack from the cold. You ladle water from frozen basins and hold the lacquer bowl to your chest to warm it before serving. If you shiver, you do so silently. The brazier is for the master's chamber, not yours. Sometimes the path to the main house is covered in sleet. You clear it before sunrise, one square stone at a time. your feet wrapped in cloth or straw sandals. Go numb, and still you walk. Still you wait. Still you bow. There are no sick days. There are no sick days. There is only the duty, the unbroken rhythm. You carry things. That is part of the job. You carry swords, scrolls, and changes of clothes. You carry trays of ink and bowls of water. You carry the wooden tablets of daily tasks, the silk bundles of travel preparation. But you also carry things. Unseen, you carry the weight of your master's reputation. You carry the tone of the household. Its quiet, its discipline. You carry the unspoken messages between one lord and another, concealed inside a folded fan, or hidden among travel documents. Sometimes you are told secrets. Other times you stumble into them by proximity. A whispered affair, a change of allegiance, a conversation between rivals heard through a half-open door. And what do? You say nothing. You bow. You clean. You keep it like a blade hidden inside a scabbard. You are not the only one who serves. The estate is layered. Like rice cakes at the New Year, there is the chief steward, the cook, the messenger, the stable hands, the weapon attendant, the garden sweepers, the candle trimmers, the seamstress, and among them, a clear line of command. If you are young, you sweep corridors. If you are clever, you prepare tea. If you are discreet, you may be permitted to carry your master's writing kit. To rise in rank is not to escape servitude. It is simply to serve more intimately. There is pride in that, but also greater risk. A mistake made by the stable boy is forgivable. A mistake made in front of a visiting ambassador is not. So you listen more than you speak. You move with quiet precision. You make yourself small, yet essential. The household rests on dozens of backs like yours, and none of them are named in the records. Evening comes. Slowly, the light turning from gold to gray across the flue. Master returns from the temple or the meeting hall. His voice is low. You bow as you receive his outer robe, folding it gently, carefully, away from the damp of the earth. You help him bathe. If needed, you prepare his night tea. You warm the stones that go beneath his blanket. You set a screen between his bed and the cold air that seeps through the sliding doors. And when all is still, when the lamp is turned down to a golden glow, and your master's breath slows into sleep, you do not rest immediately. You return to your corner of the house, narrow hall, or the back alcove, or the storage space beside the pantry. You fold yourself onto the floor, wrap in your own thin blanket, and close your eyes, knowing that in just a few hours it begins again. To be a samurai's attendant was to live in the edges of another person's life, to know them more intimately than their own family, yet remain unseen, to witness history from 5 paces behind, never speaking it aloud, but without you. The blade would dull, the armor would rust, the shoes would come undone. Without you, the rituals would break, the image would falter, the silence would not hold. You were not honored, but you were vital. So tonight, let us remember you. Let us walk in your quiet footsteps, not as tourists or guests, but as fellow watchers of the world. Let us appreciate the hush between commands, the breath between duties. Let the sword rest beside the mat. Let the robes lie folded in stillness. Let the house grow silent once again, and let you at long last rest, too. You may think of tea as something simple, a drink, a pause in conversation, a gentle warmth in the hand. But in the courts and households of the samurai, tea was something else entirely. It was structure, it was etiquette, it was power distilled into ceremony, and for the one who served it, tea was everything. The one who carried the tea was not just a server. He, or sometimes she, was a reader of moods. They watched the tension in a room the way others might watch the weather. They knew when to pour, when to leave the cup untouched just long enough for a thought to settle. No one said now would be a good time for tea. They simply expected it. A cup placed slightly to the left of the guest meant welcome. A clockwise turn of the saucer suggested privacy. The number of wipes across the rim could signal deference or disdain to the untrained eye. It was only movement, routine, but to those who lived by ritual, every motion was a sentence. And the tea-bearer, they were fluent in a language of silence. The tea did not make itself long before the guests arrived. The bearer would begin the quiet ballet of preparation. The water, drawn fresh before sunrise, must be cool. Then slowly warmed, never rushed to a boil. The tea powder matcha, finely ground, sifted with a silk cloth, not to remove lumps, but to aerate, to awaken. The bowl, a modest object, was chosen for its imperfection. Too perfect, and it would distract. Too loud, and it would dominate. Everything in the room must fade away, leaving only presence. The bamboo whisk is soaked, the linen cloth folded precisely, the sleeves tied back, not just for cleanliness, but for humility. Even before the first guest bows, the tea-bearer has bowed 100 times to tools, to space, to silence itself. To serve tea properly is to become invisible. The bearer's movements are not fast, but exact, the way one enters the room, never facing the host directly. The way the bowl is turned, never showing the most beautiful side to oneself. The way the water is ladled, a full scoop, then a half, then a breath. There is no talking, there is no nodding, there is only breath, motion, and attention. Every action is deliberate. To watch a skilled bearer prepare tea is to witness meditation in motion. And the guest, they are expected to respond, not with compliments, but with silence. Acknowledgement comes not in words, but in the angle of the bow. The pause before the first sip, the lingering gaze on the rim of the cup. It is humble, and it is profound. In a samurai household, politics rarely took place in council halls. They happened in corridors, on balconies, and often over tea. To be the one who poured the tea was to be present for these moments. You were not supposed to listen, but you could not help hearing. Two clan leaders might meet after a tense negotiation. They would sit in quiet, taking the cup you placed before them. Hands steady, but eyes sharp. You could feel the tension, even in the way they held the bowl, too tightly or too long, and you would notice the words they didn't say. The tea bearer, in these moments, became more than a servant. You were a witness, sometimes a buffer, sometimes a silent protector of dignity. You might refill the cup at just the right time to prevent a remark from becoming an insult. You might let the silence stretch to allow a guest to reconsider his tone. You never spoke, but your timing, your grace, shaped the room, and everyone in it knew that not all tea bearers were invisible. Some rose to the level of trusted companion, not in title, but in truth. They knew their master's moods better. They could anticipate needs before they were voiced. Some masters, especially in their older years, spoke most freely during tea. They confessed their doubts, their aches, their regrets. The bearer listened. They offered no judgment, no advice, only presence. In this way, the one who poured the tea became a kind of counselor, not by offering answers, but by holding space. And when battles loomed or betrayal crept into the court, it was sometimes the tea bearer who knew first, simply from the way the tea was touched, to witness suffering without trying to fix it. That is not weakness. It is strength, quiet strength. Though much of samurai life was dominated by men, the tea room offered a rare space where women could hold quiet power. Female attendants, especially older ones, were often trusted with managing the tea spaces. They chose the ceramics. They arranged the flowers. They guided younger servers on how to move, how to bow, how to observe. Some women, born into lower-ranking samurai families, never married. Instead, they devoted their lives to the tea room. They were not warriors, but they held authority over atmosphere. A subtler battlefield, they could calm tensions. Between visiting families, they could ease the sorrow of a widow. They could soften the edge of a difficult announcement with the right placement of incense to outsiders. They were simply hostesses, but to those who knew, they were guardians of emotional balance. In a world of swords, they wielded stillness in times of political tension. Kay could become a tool of subversion, a servant loyal to a disgraced family, might serve a bitter brew to signal discontent. A bearer might place a cracked bowl in front of a guest as an insult, quiet, deniable, but unmistakable. During moments of purge or civil conflict, tea-bearers sometimes acted as message runners, hiding notes inside folded cloths or beneath trays. Even the choice of flowers could signal allegiance: plum blossoms for resilience, chrysanthemums for loyalty, camellias for sorrow. No one shouted rebellion, but those who watched closely understood. The tea room was not neutral. It was layered with signals. It became a theater where politics, pain, and persuasion played out through shadows and steam. And now, the kettle is empty. The bowls are stacked. The room, once filled with meaning, is quiet again. But the presence of the tea-bearer lingers, not in applause, not in recognition, but in the peace they created. Their art was not invention. Their loyalty was not loud. It was lasting. They served with elegance, not because they had to, but because they understood the power of care. So let this be a tribute, not just to tea, but to those who made it sacred, to the silent strength behind the cup, to the breath between gestures, to the stillness that made everything else possible now. Rest. Let the steam fade from your thoughts. Let the weight of the day dissolve. Let your mind settle, like leaves in warm water, and sleep. When you picture the samurai at war, you may imagine banners flapping in the wind, the glint of metal, the battle cries echoing across a valley. But just behind that chaos, just beyond the field of action, is another world entirely, a world of quiet movement, of boiled rice and sharpened needles, of packed bundles and sleepless nights. This is the world of the camp. Follower, not a soldier, not a hero, but the person who made the war. Survivable when the warlords declared campaign. Armies did not leave alone. They brought with them cooks, armorers, cleaners, stable hands, errand runners, and servants of all sorts. These followers packed supplies before the first step was taken, rice balls wrapped in leaves, spare sandals, flint for fire, cloth for wounds, and ropes for tents. You, as a camp follower, walked alongside or behind the main procession. You carried food, water, oil, and firewood. You walked in dust, in snow, and sometimes in silence, and yet you were not written into the records. When the army reached a stopping point, it was not the samurai who built the fire or dug the latrines. It was you. You laid out bedding made from straw, boiled millet over weak flames, and rubbed tired horses down with handfuls of dry moss. You might repair a broken sandal with twine and a toothpick, or patch a tear in an undergarment with old thread by the light of a campfire, with fingers numb from cold. Your reward was simple. If you did your job well, someone else might sleep a little more comfortably before risking their life the next day. If you failed, people went hungry, got sick, or froze, so you worked without thanks, without pause. A samurai's tent was more than shelter. It was his strategy. Room, his shrine, his sanctuary. You kept it clean, dry, and in working order, even during a downpour. You guarded the entrance, quietly turning away anyone without reason. You lit incense to mask the smell of blood or sweat. You aired out the sleeping mats. You boiled water for his tea. Even the field, sometimes, you helped your master into his armor, the same way you did at home. But here, there was urgency, less ritual, more weight, and still the silence remained. Service, even on the battlefield, demanded grace. There were no walls on the road, no tiled roofs, no polished floors, only mud, only the smell of wet horses and boiled barley. You slept beneath tarps when it rained, beside bundles of gear. You kept your master's swords dry by wrapping them in oil-soaked cloth. If you were lucky, you had a wooden bowl for soup. If not, you drank from your cupped hands. Sometimes you heard the cries of the wounded nearby. Sometimes you helped dig graves. Always you listened, and always you stayed quiet at night when the tramping of boots and the orders of captains faded into embers. The camp shifted into a hum of smaller motions. You might warm your hands by the fire, or use that warmth to boil one last pot of rice. You rolled up armor cords and dried them on rocks. You whispered small prayers, and you slept with one eye open, ready to rise at the first sound of movement, because at dawn it would begin again. Again, they called it honor to ride into battle, but there was honor, too, in washing out wounds with cold stream water, in boiling tea leaves in dented pots, in sowing tears, in traveling. Robes by moonlight, you were not written into. Ballads, Your name was not carved in stone, but the samurai did not walk alone. Every step he took rested on the shoulders of those who followed. Quietly, faithfully, unseen. So now, let the fire crackle in your memory. Let the footsteps of the past grow soft and sleep, knowing you served a purpose, even if no one ever asked your name. Imagine. You step off a ship onto the shores of a land where nothing is familiar. The language is strange. The faces are curious. The customs unknown. And you, a tall man with skin dark as night, stand in a world of pale paper walls, whispered bows, and silent glances. You are Yasuk, and this is your journey. We do not know exactly where Yasuk was born. Perhaps in what is now Mozambique, perhaps near the Nile, or somewhere further inland. But what we do know is that he came to Japan not as a warrior, but as a servant. He was likely brought by a Jesuit missionary, perhaps Father Alessandro Valignano, who saw him as both protection and symbol of prestige. For many in Japan at the time, a black man was a curiosity, a presence so rare it seemed mythical. When Yasu first appeared in Kyoto in 1581, crowds gathered to see him. Some thought his skin was ink. Others believed he was not fully human, but he stood tall, calm, and watched. In silence, one day, he was brought before a powerful daimyo, a man both feared and admired, a unifier of provinces, a dreamer of impossible victories. Oda, Nobunaga, accounts say Nobunaga was fascinated by Yasuke. He made him strip to the waist and scrubbed his skin, convinced it was paint. But when the dark hue did not change, and when Yasu remained composed, something shifted. Nobunaga, impressed by the man's stature and grace, took him in, not as a spectacle, but as a retainer. In the following months, Yasuke's role changed. He was given a residence, a short sword, then a katana, perhaps a suit of armor. He learned the language, or at least enough of it. He dined with nobles. He rode beside Nobunaga, and though he may never have fully belonged, he was no longer merely a guest. He was now a samurai. But peace does not last long in Sengoku, Japan. In 1582, the unthinkable happened. One of Nobunaga's generals, Akechi Mitsuhide, betrayed him at Hanaji Temple. The ambush began. Yasuke was there. He fought. Some say he defended Nobunaga to the last. Others say he survived, only to surrender shortly after. In the chaos that followed, the African samurai was taken by Mitsuhide's men and handed back to the Jesuits. Why? Because, as the records say, he is not Japanese. He is not truly one of them. And just like that, the chapter closed. We do not know what happened to Yasug. After that, some say he returned with the missionaries. Others say he stayed, quietly fading into the corners of Kyoto. Some imagine him wandering, sword in hand, Ka, name whispered through tea houses. But what we do know is this. For a brief moment, Ka, he stood at the heart of power in feudal Japan. And he did so not as a conqueror, but as a man who observed, who adapted, who carried himself with dignity, even in strangeness. Why Asuk did not ask to be written into legend. He simply walked forward when others stared. He bowed, he listened, he learned, and he waited, and through quiet endurance, he earned his place, not because of bloodline, not because of family, name, but because of presence, and in a world of swords and silence. That was enough. So now, let that sword rest. Let the temple fall away into memory. Let the name Yasuk drift softly through your mind, as quiet and enduring as the man himself. Close your eyes and sleep. Imagine waking before sunrise, not to polish armor, not to ready a horse, but to wash rice, to tend fire, to weigh a pinch of salt with your fingers in the grand estates of the samurai. Not every servant carried a blade. Some carried ladles, some wielded knives, some commanded boiling water instead of battalions. These were the cooks, the stewards, the quiet rhythm behind the strength of an army. And they, too, were warriors, just of a gentler kind. To cook for a samurai household was not merely a job. It was a ritual. The rice had to be rinsed exactly 7 times. The miso stirred in a single direction. The tofu sliced in even cubes, not for beauty, but for balance. If a meal was too cold, it was an insult. Too rich, a distraction. Too simple, a sign of disrespect. Each dish carried a message. The use of bitter greens in spring hinted at endurance. Pickled plum in summer warned of caution. A broth, light but nourishing, might offer silent apology after a failed campaign. The cook had to know not just flavors, but emotions. Meals were not served equally. A master dined in quiet elegance, lacquered bowls, seasonal garnish, and perhaps a splash of sake poured by a favored attendant. A guest might receive something different, spiced with care, arranged for flattery. Meanwhile, the servants and lower retainers ate simply, barley mixed with rice, salted daikon, dried sardines if lucky, but no one starved. because a hungry servant makes a poor listener, and a distracted guard forgets his post, feeding the household, was not charity. It was protection, and those in the kitchen knew this truth better than most. Inside the kitchen, there was a world within the world. At the top stood the okami, the chief steward, plateau. Often an older woman who had managed meals for decades. Her eyes missed nothing. Below her, the fire tenders, the rice washers, the knife hands, the broth keepers, even in the warmth of the hearth. Hierarchy ruled. New servants learned by watching, by slicing daikon until their hands went numb, by stirring pot through steam and silence, by being corrected gently but firmly. A misplaced dish could cost reputation, a broken bowl, a guest's insult, so everyone learned to move quietly, to speak rarely, to bow even in flour-dusted robes. And yet, amid all the order, there were tender moments, a cook humming while grinding sesame seeds, a young assistant learning to braid pickled radish into a coiled dot, an older steward quietly placing an extra dumpling into a sick child's bowl. The kitchen was where news traveled fastest, where gossip warmed the air as much as the fire, where old griefs softened with warm sake, and in the hush of the night, long after the last plate had been scrubbed. 2. Some cooks were trained to taste for poison, not out of drama, but out of need. A slight bitterness in the broth, an unfamiliar sheen on the rice. Sometimes cook noticed, sometimes they said nothing, sometimes that silence saved lives. It is said that some kitchens kept tiny bundles of activated charcoal tucked behind wooden shelves, just in case, and if a master survived a meal unharmed. He rarely thanked the cook, but he noticed and that in this world was reward enough. The samurai may have drawn swords, but someone boiled the water, someone washed the turnips, someone wrapped the rice cakes for the journey, someone balanced bitter and sweet, not just in flavor, but in life. They were not honored in scrolls. They were not remembered by name, but their work filled the bellies of warriors. It steadied the hands of archers. It comforted the hearts of the dying. So tonight, let us bow quietly to the samurai's kitchen dot. Let us hear the soft hiss of the kettle, the chop of knife on wood, the clink of bowls being stacked in the dark. Let these sounds carry you gently into sleep. ... Where even warriors dream of warmth, of steam, and of rice. Before the day's duties could be seen, they were felt in the softness of a clean robe, in the smooth drape of sleeves that carried no scent but pine and starch, in the crisp folds of a hakama that moved like water over knees. And who made that possible? Not the warrior, not the noble, but the one bent beside the stream. Sleeves tied, hands submerged in silence, the laundry keeper in the world of the samurai. Clothing was not fashion, it was status. It was armor of another kind, and someone had to care for it. The work began early, before the armor was donned, before the banners were raised, before the house stirred. You carried the robes, wrapped in cloth, to the stream just beyond the walls. You knew the flow of the water, where it was soft, where it was clean, where the rocks would not tear delicate hems. You washed with a wooden paddle, not to beat the fabric, but to coax out the wear. You used ash to lift oil, rice water to soften threads, sunlight to bleach, but never scorch. There were no buttons, no machines, no quick fixes, only time, only your hands, only care. Washing was only half the ritual. Drying required watchfulness. The sun too hot could warp colors. The breeze too rough could twist the seams. And folding was everything. The robe must be smoothed while warm, creases aligned with breath-like precision, sleeves tucked in, never curled, each garment returned to the chest of drawers. Like a prayer, quiet, symmetrical, full of intention. A misplaced fold was an insult, a stained collar, a loss of face, and so you folded as if the fabric could speak, and, perhaps, it did. No cloth lasts forever. Threads fray, seams pull, stitches split when stretched too far in a duel, or a hurried bow, or a winter gust. But you, the laundry keeper, did not discard. You repaired, with thread the same color, with stitches so small they could not be seen unless one looked for them. You reinforced the knees of old trousers. You added lining to worn hourie. You reattached ornamental knots on ceremonial robes with a needle no thicker than a hair. You gave cloth more life even when its owner could not see the work, and that was enough. No one clapped for you. No one bowed when their sleeves moved easily. Thanks to the oil you rubbed into the threads. But that was never the point. In your corner of the estate, by the wooden buckets, the drying poles, the racks of steaming robes, you found peace. Your world was rhythm. Dip, scrub, rinse. Hang, smooth, fold, stitch, knot, sigh. You spoke rarely, but you listened to the wind. You listened to the sound of cloth becoming clean again. Some robes did not return as they left. They came back with ash in the lining, mud crusted into the hem. Sometimes blood. You cleaned what you could, but there were stains you did not touch. Not out of fear, but respect. A master's final robe, returned folded, but empty. A child's garment, never worn again. These you held with slower hands. You washed them. Gently, you dried them out of view. And when they were done, you wrapped them in soft cloth and placed them at the back of the wardrobe. Some cloth carries memory, and that memory is not always meant to fade. Not all service is loud. Some of it happens when no one is watching, when no one says thank you, when no one even remembers. But still, the water runs, the threads tighten, the robes fall into perfect folds, and the world turns. Freshly laundered, quietly mended, so tonight, let the stream flow softly through your thoughts. Let the scent of pine and clean linen drift into your room. Let your mind fold itself gently into rest. ... and sleep in peace. Every samurai, no matter how proud or powerful, must one day bow one final time. And when that moment came, it was not the warrior who prepared his departure, but the servant, not with swords, not with armor, but with cloth, with incense, with silence. You did not cry loudly. You did not speak. You only moved. Slowly, gently, with deep care, because in death, dignity must be preserved. When your master passed, whether on the field, at home, or in ritual death, your work began immediately. You washed his body with warm water, wiping away the dust of duty, the sweat of command. You clipped nails, you combed hair, you straightened fingers curled in pain. His robes were changed white for purity, his sword laid beside him for identity. His name, sometimes written in brushstroke, was now given to the afterlife. You did all this with hands trained for detail, but moved by something deeper, a final act of service, a last offering of loyalty. The body lay in state for a night. You watched over it. You tended incense. You trimmed candle wicks. Sometimes mourners came. Sometimes no one came at all. But you remained, sitting beside the shroud, listening to the soft crackle of the wick, to the shifting night outside. No sleep, no sigh, no sigh. Just waiting, the way you had always done in life. And now in death, the next morning, the procession began. You walked behind the bier, robes tied, tight eyes down. At the cremation grounds, wood was arranged carefully, cedar, pine, and straw. The fire was lit. You stood still. The smoke rose slowly, spiraling into the gray sky. You did not look away, not because you had to watch, but because you could not leave him alone, even now, once the fire faded. The ashes remained. Bone fragments were collected with chopsticks, passed person to person, never handed directly. The pieces were placed in an urn, the urn wrapped in silk. The silk nestled in a wooden box. You carried it home, not as burden, but as continuation. The man was gone, but your duty remained. The burial mound was simple, perhaps marked by stone, perhaps hidden among pine trees, perhaps remembered only by those who served. You cleared the space, you pulled weeds, you placed offerings, rice, salt, a folded robe. Each season, you visited. You dusted the stone. You whispered greetings. You remembered, because someone had to. Not all service ends with a bow. Some continues in memory, in ritual, in care. You were never the one in armor, never the one in songs, never the one in scrolls, but you were the last to leave. And in that there was something sacred. So now, let the incense fade. Let the robe lie folded. Let the name dissolve into the air like morning mist. And you, who walked beside warriors, may finally rest. No more waiting, no more watching. Only stillness, only peace and sleep.